Welcome back. I am here today with Major Tom Haviland, who is sort of the the guy out there here talking about something that needs more attention, and it's these strange clots. They're being pulled from corpses. They're nothing that we've seen before, and I'm not a pathologist, so it's not a little bit outside my area, but Tom has been talking to people that deal with this every day, and he's going to tell us more. Welcome, Tom. Thanks so much for coming. And
Dr. Burton, yeah, thanks for having me on. And here's what we're talking about today.
Here we go.
Yeah, this is about these unusual white fibrous clots, Mary, that embalmers with 20 or 30 years of experience have never seen before until the years of COVID and the COVID vaccines. Here's another one. This one's about 5.5 inches long, about half an inch wide. And this actually came from the abdominal aorta. It's one of the largest blood vessels in the body. And so it's a very strange phenomenon that's happening. And actually, I've been in touch with a scientific team that believes they've nailed down what's actually happening to form these clots. We believe that our natural blood clotting protein fibrinogen, it normally converts into fibrin when a normal clot's formed. The fibrinogen in this case is being hijacked by both the spike protein, either from the virus or the vaccine, is becoming phosphorylated and it's binding with that fibrinogen. And also the phospholipid nanoparticles get involved as well that, carry the mRNA vaccine to the cells. So it's a very serious problem. And the shocking thing is the embalmers are seeing these things in 20 to 30% of their corpses, Mary. This is not a rare phenomenon. These things are quite prevalent.
How did you get involved in this fight? Because you're not an embalmer, right? Your background is the military.
Electrical engineering, exactly. I'm a retared U.S. Air Force major. I spent 20 years in the Air Force, retiring to the rank of major. Then I spent an additional 16 years with the Air Force, working with aircraft like the F-16 Falcon, the F-22 Raptor, the F-117 stealth fighter. Love my job. I was having a great time in my job. And Mary, I got fired in October of 2021 from my defense contracting job at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base because I refused to take the COVID-19 vaccine.
Wow.
Yeah. So a 3-star general actually had sent out an email to the whole base telling the government civilians, the military, and us defense contractors the dates we had to get our shots by or get kicked out. And he also tried to guilt those of us who hadn't taken the jabs into taking them. So I sent him back an email, Mary. Remember, this is an Air Force 3-star general. I said, shame on you. You failed us. Instead of letting us decide for ourselves whether or not to take an experimental drug, you chose your time trying to guilt us into taking the jab. Shame on you. And I didn't just send the email to him. I CC'd all 30,000 people that work at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. So I knew what was going to happen. I got a call a half hour later from my boss, and I was fired from my $165,000 a year job as a data analyst and engineer for shaming the Air Force 3-star in front of the whole base.
I love it.
Somebody had to do it. Nobody was pushing back. I know you saw the same thing in the hospitals, right? None of the administrators, none of the senior officials were pushing back against these unlawful mandates.
I would love to see that email. Do you still have it?
I do. Yeah.
I would love to see that. What made you suspicious? Because in the military, you're used to taking shots that most people don't have to take. So what made you push back on this one?
Well, a new technology, mRNA, technology using lipid nanoparticle delivery system. The first time we'd ever used it. I'm a data guy, so I like to look at the data before I make any decisions. So our own CDC wasn't putting out very good information, Mary, in the fall of 2021 when I got this mandate. So I went to look at their counterpart in the UK. They were putting out good information. Public Health England, also known as UK Health Security Agency, they had a document out, Mary, called SARS-CoV-2 Variants of Concern, Technical Briefing number 23. It was dated 17 September 2021. And on pages 19 and 20 in that document, there's a table 5. And in that table 5, it showed hundreds of thousands of breakthrough cases of COVID amongst the fully vaccinated. At the very same time, over here, they were saying it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
Right.
So they were lying to us over here, and they knew they were lying to us when they said that. So
Well, is that information still up on their website? I can't believe they would publicize.
I think you can still find it. Yeah, I've actually downloaded that document. And what's interesting is the very next month, and their next time they came out the technical briefings every month or so.
Mhm.
That table disappeared. So
Right.
somebody there at that public health thing that must have realized, hey, we have this document encouraging people to take the vaccines, but this table is saying the opposite, it's saying the vaccines aren't working, right? It's, people taking the shots are still catching COVID and transmitting it to others.
Yeah,
So
that was my wake up call. I mean, I didn't get the shot, but I didn't have a knee jerk response not to get it. But then I started seeing all the breakthroughs, right?
Right.
And that's when I realized, yeah, this is not.
Well, and we also knew about the existence of the Nuremberg Code, right? Especially as in the military, they use the Allied nations used at the end of World War II to try the Nazi doctors, and it said anytime in the future, if you're going to experiment on people, that has to be voluntary, not mandatory, right? And the people need to have informed consent. And there's no way we had informed consent at that time, right? I mean, you're supposed to know the duration of the experiment. They told you, 2 shots would be good enough, but then, oops, you're going to need boosters because these things aren't lasting long. And then also, of course, we didn't know anything about either the short-term or long-term side effects. The information sheet that came with it was blank in terms of so it was just a total violation. That's why I decided, and I was lucky. I was 61 at the time. I was already drawing my retired major salary. I was also just a year away from drawing Social Security early, and my wife is 10 years younger and she still works. So we were able to swing it and get our 2 kids through expensive colleges anyways.
Wow. What was your reaction from your colleagues?
Pretty much just threw me under the bus. In fact, one of the colonels, I was involved in several classified programs. So I was actually telecommuting at the time. So I had to that afternoon take my computer in, take my badge in, get debriefed out of several programs I was in. And on the way out, I was walked out by a colonel, and he looked at me and he said, "Tom, why'd you do it?" And I looked back at him and I said, "Why didn't you?"
Right. Good
Why didn't you push back? We should decide for ourselves something this critical about a new drug going into your body. That should be a decision you make, not that's made for you.
Did you know anybody else who wasn't getting the shot, just maybe not so vocally about it? They were doing it quietly?
There were people that were trying to use religious exemptions and other medical exemptions to, not take the shots and try to wait it out. Mm-hmm. But I decided to make a stand because it was a blatant, push of tyranny on all of us. Mm-hmm. And I think you felt the same thing too, right? It's something that needed to be spoken because we let this stand. If a government can tell you what you have to put into your body, what can't they tell you to do? Right. To me, it's the ultimate form of tyranny.
Right.
But it became a blessing because I went into early retirement, and it led me to eventually I watched that Died Suddenly movie in November of 2022. Mm-hmm. And I know it kind of got panned. There was some controversy about it and some problems with some of the footage in it. But at the 13-minute and 15-second mark, Mary, a very amazing statement was made. An embalmer from the state of Indiana, Mr. Wallace Hooker, was lecturing at an Ohio Embalmers Association conference in Columbus, Ohio, on the 26th of October in 2022. And he's lecturing to a room of 100 embalmers. And he showed photographs of these white fibrous clots that he'd been removing from his corpses for about the last year at that time. And he said, by a show of hands, how many of you are seeing these same white fibrous clots? And he says in the movie, almost all 100 embalmers raised their hands, yes. Mm. He then asked them, well, when did you start seeing them? And they all agreed it was in the middle of 2021, about 6 months after the COVID vaccines rolled out. So whatever else happened in that movie, that statement's either true or false, right? Either those embalmers raised their hands or they didn't. So I watched the movie the night it premiered. It was the week of Thanksgiving in November of 2022, Monday of that week. I got the very next morning, Tuesday, and I said to myself, I don't think any reporter is going to chase after this story. Mm-hmm. So I decided to myself to call the Ohio Embalmers Association. They're located in Cincinnati. I live in Dayton. And I talked to their president, Mr. Dan Becker, their vice president, Mr. Woody Wilson, and their secretary, Mr. David Hicks. I asked all 3 gentlemen, hey, did you happen to be in the room at the time that those 100 embalmers supposedly raised their hands? Well, Mary, none of the 3 of them were in the room at the time. However, Mr. Woody Wilson, the vice president at that time, He runs his own funeral home up in Marysville, Ohio, about an hour north of where I live in Dayton, and he does his own embalming. A lot of funeral directors do their own embalming. Woody said to me, Tom, I'm seeing the white fibrous clots too. So that was my wow moment. I now had this official officer, and then Woody became the president of the Ohio Embalmers Association, very well-respected man, corroborating these 6 or 7 embalmers in that Died Suddenly movie that said they were seeing these white fibrous clots. So then I decided immediately to work with my friend from Northern Ohio, Miss Laura Kasner, who, by the way, runs our terrific Substack. We have a free Substack that we call Clotastrophe.
Okay.
You can go to it, Laura, Laura, Kasner, Kasner .substack.com. And has lots of information on it. But Laura and I decided to run a survey, first here in the United States, and then we expanded it to Canada, the UK, and Australia, and New Zealand to see how prevalent these white fibrous clots were. Because we had a sneaking suspicion that the FDA and the CDC were not going to be looking into this problem. And we were right. They haven't touched it for the last 5 years. So, well,
what about have you gotten much pickup from reporters, other reporters? I mean, I don't feel like we hear enough about this.
Yeah, sometime in 2023, both myself and Richard Hirschman, who are one of the embalmers featured in the Died Suddenly movie, one of the very first brave souls to speak out about seeing these clots, despite getting ridiculed. We were both interviewed by Cheryl Atkinson for her Full Measure TV program. So we've been on Cheryl's show. I actually, after attending one of the hearings in Washington, D.C., run by Senator Ron Johnson, I walked down the street to the Epic Times headquarters and did an hour sit down with Jan Jekielek on American thought leaders talking about the clots. Richard and I were also flown in by Del Bigtree into Austin and did a episode of The High Wire where we talked about the white fibrous clots. But other than that, we haven't had a lot of superstars. Tucker Carlson, I actually went to see Tucker in September of 2024, paid $1,600 of my own money to do a VIP meet and greet. Actually gave him a vial of these clots, gave a vial to his producer, Samantha, but yet he has not put me on a show. Neither is Glenn Beck or Joe Rogan or Megyn Kelly. As you know, Megan's been injured by the vaccine. She has an autoimmune disorder, but her producer, Allison Jordan, says we're not interested at this time. So it's perplexing because this is the most spectacular of all the side effects of the vaccine. It's the one you can see.
Right. That's the problem. We can't see anything. It's just what has anybody analyzed these clots under a microscope?
Yeah. Richard Hirschman and I are in touch with a Mr. Greg Harrison, who's an organic chemist in Sydney, Australia. And he's been working with several teams of scientists at several university labs in both the Australia, New Zealand region and in Europe. And they've examined the clots and done a whole series of batteries of tests on them. They've done what's called inductively coupled mass spectrometry testing, the ICP-MS testing. That basically checks for what elements are in the clots. And not surprisingly, these clots contain very little magnesium, potassium, or iron, which are in high amounts in normal blood. Iron's what gives blood its red color. Conversely, they have found a lot of phosphorus, sulfur, and sometimes even metals such as tin in the clots, which is kind of interesting. And it leads to a theory that Mr. Harrison has about the phosphorylation of the spike protein that's taking place, as well as the phospholipid nanoparticle from the vaccine, like I said, is binding with our natural blood clotting protein fibrinogen to turn it into this very bizarre polymer instead. They've done some other testing. They've done high performance liquid chromatography testing that's shown that in a normal clot, you have 3 chains of fibrinogen, an alpha, beta, and gamma chain, and they kind of intertwine to form a stronger rope that becomes fibrin. And it's normally in a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio. But in these white fibrous clots, it's in a bizarre 9-to-4-to-1 ratio. The fibrinogen beta chain is 36% of the clot. The gamma chain is 16% of the clot, and the alpha chain is only 4%. So we know that something is happening here. That our normal fibrinogen is getting hijacked by this binding process, and it's turning into these basically very resistant clots that, our natural enzyme plasmin, plasmin, that breaks down normal clots, is not working on this. So that's why these tend to grow and persist and become these monster clots.
Have you pulled on them? I mean, can you pull them apart? Or are they like very, how friable are they? What are they?
They're tough and rubbery. The embalmers describe them as what looks like calamari, and they stretch like a rubber band and then stretch back into place again. So it's very, very unusual.
How are they thick? Are they like, are they, I mean, I can kind of see, is it is it like the thickness of a rubber band, or are they?
Yeah, and they're solid all the way through. A lot of people have asked if they're actually tubular. No, they're actually solid all the way through. Yeah, in fact, some of the clots, and I think you had them on the show, Dr. Kevin McCarran from Japan, the neuroscientist. Richard sent about a dozen to 14 of the clots to Kevin to examine. Kevin took a small 5 micrometer slice of one of Hirschman's embalmer's clots and put it under a scanning electron microscope at a very high magnification of 5,000 times. And he saw basically, well, this is what he saw.
Right.
So, and what's different about that is normal fibrinogen, when it turns into fibrin, looks like nice, smooth spaghetti strands, like it's cooked spaghetti. And they form
turn that over again so we can see that's the normal.
Yeah.
Show us wait, back up a little bit. We can't see, but yeah, a little bit more, back up a little bit more. Okay, there. So that's the abnormal.
That's the abnormal, right?
And then show the normal.
And this figure came out of a paper by Ruan colleagues, RYU and colleagues, that was featured in Nature in August of 2024. And what it shows is natural fibrinogen on the left as it turns into fibrin. Like I said, it looks like nice, smooth spaghetti noodles. And if they form kind of a net, right? They collect your red blood cells and your platelets and form a clot at the side of the wound. Say you get a cut on your arm. And then when that that wound's healed, then we have plasmin comes along and attaches to those nice smooth spaghetti noodles, breaks down the clot. But as you can see in the Root paper here, it also showed, here's what it looks like when this fibrinogen comes in contact with the spike protein, either from the COVID virus or from the COVID vaccine. It becomes all twisted, misfolded. It develops these nasty nodules on it, and then our plasmin cannot attach and break it down. The clots then they start off as small microclots, they aggregate, and then they persist into these large white fibrous clots. So other tests, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, can you detect these on an ultrasound or a CT scan? Are they?
It's hard to. One of the other things I got here is this is a email I got from a Dr. Mahana Basharat. And he is a endovascular specialist and cardiologist in Jacksonville, Florida. And he admitted to me, Mary, he's been pulling these same white fibrous clots out of living people for the last 5 years in his cath lab.
Wow.
On this side over here, you can see it's a white fibrous clot still covered in blood when it's first taken out. Now, if you look closely there, you can kind of see a pinkish cord running down through the middle of it. When that is washed off, that pinkish cord will become a white fibrous clot. This was actually a DVT, a deep vein thrombosis, taken out of a gentleman's leg. But if you look here on the far side of the page here, you can see kind of a dark stream of blood flow going up about halfway and stopping. That's where the clot is in his body. You can't see that there's a clot there, really. It's actually taking on so much of it's like a cast of that portion of the vascular system. It's almost indistinguishable from the mass around it. Now in the middle is another angiogram of that blood vessel. You can see the dark stream running vertically. That's after the clot was removed. So now blood flow has been completely restored. So this was a successful procedure. So this is why radiologists are having a hard time seeing the white fibrous clots when they're in the body. Because like I said, they can take on the shape of that vessel and almost mimic the vessel itself. And so you don't know until you pull it out whether it's a white fibrous clot or a traditional, what's called grape jelly clot that dissolves very easily in your hands, or a chicken fat clot, which are much smaller, yellowish in color, and tear very easily, not like these really tough rubbery clots that are hard to break.
Well, and I assume the medications that we use to dissolve clots don't work on these.
Right. Dr. Bashir told me their best clot busting drugs like tissue plasminogen activator, TPA, don't work on these things at all. So what he does is in his cath lab, he goes in with flexible catheters that either suck the clot out, they scrape it out, or usually he has to lasso it and pull it out. As the catheter has a lasso on the end, he gets a hold of it and then pulls the clot out that way. In fact, there's a Jacksonville TV news show. It was about a 10-minute thing they did on Dr. Bashir, showing him pulling a clot out of an individual using the lasso style catheter. What's interesting is at the end of that article, Mary, they never showed the clot that was removed. So I suspect it probably was a white fibrous clot, and they knew they probably couldn't show it, because if they did, there'd be additional questions. And hey, what kind of clot is that? That looks like an unusual clot. So,
have you heard from any pathologists on this? People that are doing autopsies? Are they speaking out?
Dr. Philip McMillan, who runs a channel in the UK called Vegan Health, he is, and I'm complaining too, and I think Dr. McCullough as well, and everybody else. There's so few autopsies being done on people. And the embalmers, what they believe is, and when autopsies are typically done, they'll take a close look at the heart, they'll look at the brain, they may have checked for things like toxicology, if there was people were suspected to be on drugs, that kind of thing. But typically, coroners don't take a very close look at the entire vascular system. So the embalmers believe that's why they're the ones that are finding the clots, and the coroners and guys doing autopsies are missing them. So
Yeah, that makes total sense.
What's interesting is after I made contact with Dr. Basharat, he later on broke off our communications, Mary. He sent me an email saying, "Tom, I've been instructed to terminate communications immediately. Sorry for the inconvenience."
What? Is he at an academic center?
I'm thinking that his hospital administrator got to him, right? Said, "Hey, we don't want you talking about this anymore. You know, because anything that could potentially come out and be linked to the vaccines, you know." So it's unfortunate, right? And I know you understand what's going on. You know, we've seen what happens to doctors who do speak out, like yourself, like Dr. McCullough, Ryan Cole, Pierre Corey. They go after your board certifications, your licenses. So it's unfortunate. So what I did then, Mary, is based upon him as a whistleblower and another gentleman that Dr. McMillan had found, a different cath lab doctor. And this cath lab doctor that Dr. McMillan found, he did a 52-minute Substack interview with him. And during that interview, that gentleman said he's been working in the same cath lab for over 20 years. And he's been pulling anywhere between 3 to 10 of these white fibrous clots out of patients, living patients, per week in his one cath lab alone. And unlike the embalmers, these doctors do have access to the COVID vaccination records of all their patients. Right. They can tell you how many shots they took, when they took their shot, what brand they took. And he says whenever he finds the white fibrous clots, that person's been jabbed with anywhere between 1 to 8 COVID jabs. And the more jabs they've taken, the worse the clotting seems to be. But he went dark on Dr. McMillan too. Dr. McMillan knows his name, but nobody else does.
Are you seeing them in young people at all? Or is it all?
Not as much as in older people. One of the surveys we did, I've done 4 surveys at the end of 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. My first 2022 survey, by the way, there were 3 main conclusions. About 66% of the embalmers said they were seeing the white fibrous clot. So it is the majority of embalmers seeing this phenomenon. They said they started seeing them in 2021 after the jabs rolled out. Although a few said they did see them in 2020, which is interesting. That's the year we had COVID, but no vaccines yet. But as I said earlier, there is a spike protein on the surface of the virus itself. So in strange cases where it gets into the blood, we think that it could possibly form these clots. But we think the majority of them are being formed because of the vaccine, because of the persistence of the mRNA continuing to produce spike. And then the third conclusion from that first survey was that they were seeing the clots in 30% of their corpses. Like I said, an extremely shocking number. And it's been that way over the 4 years, Mary, that we've done the surveys. Anywhere between about 70 to 80% of the embalmers each year say they're seeing the clots. They're seeing them anywhere between 20 to 30% of their corpses. So, and they're also seeing the microclotting phenomenon, which they describe as what looks like coffee grounds draining off the corpse. When they drain the blood off to put the formaldehyde in, they see what looks like coffee grounds in the blood. That's an indication of microclotting, which is, it occurs at the capillary level, your very small blood vessels, and it can block the exchange of oxygen at the lungs, and then they carry that oxygen to all the major organs in your body. But one of the other questions I did ask them was about age stratification in my 2023 survey. And the good news is not too many embalmers they did see them in all age groups, even in teens and youth, but they started to see them compared to the years prior to COVID and the vaccines, a big increase starting in the 30, 60-year-olds and up. And particularly alarming to me was the 36 to 50-year-old age group. It was a lot of embalmers answered they were seeing them in that age group. And as you know, that's, usually you don't think of heart attacks and strokes happening to people that young. Usually that doesn't happen to you in your late 50s, early 60s. But, this actually dovetails very well with Edward Dowd's work. Edward Dowd said that he saw tremendous increase in death and disability in 36 to 50-year-olds starting in the third quarter of 2021 after Biden put the mandates out for the vaccines, not just on the military, but also on, he tried to put it out on 100, every company that had more than 100 employees. And even though our Supreme Court shot that down, a lot of companies acted preemptively and they made their employees take the shots. So that's one thing. All the work that I've done really dovetails well with Ed's work and other work as well. So yeah, I think we've got a very good explanation of what's happening here, vascular wise.
Have you sent your information to the government? Have you sent it
every year? I've had the survey. Mary, I was so frustrated. In fact, when we had the USA portion of our first survey done back in December of 2022, I immediately sent that on January 19th of 2023 to the FDA's VRBPAC, their Vaccine and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee. They were having a meeting on the 26th of January of 2023. So I sent my information a full week before that meeting, showing them the alarming number of corpses that were containing these clots. Like I said, 30% of the corpses from the USA embalmers were having these clots in them. This is the very same time that they were downgrading the stroke signal from a moderate signal to a slight signal. At the same time, I had sent it, and I actually asked to speak at that meeting. I was not given a chance to speak at that meeting, but I did, submit a write-up, and I did get a tracking number from the FDA. So I have a tracking number from the FDA on 19 January, which is proof that they received my information with this alarming, new phenomenon happening in their corpses. But yet they did nothing. They turned around, they downgraded that signal from moderate to slight for stroke, and then they continued to push the vaccines on everybody. And every year since, by the way, I've sent the results of my surveys immediately to the NIH, CDC, FDA, crickets the last 4 years. I even called Jay Bhattacharya last August. I have Jay's home phone number. So I called him on a Saturday night. I didn't want to bother him for too long, but I said, Jay, I wanted to make sure that he was aware that I had just come back the previous month from being a guest speaker at the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association's annual convention last year in 2025. In fact, I'm invited back this year, next month, on the 31st of May. I'll be going back again. This tells you this is not a hoax, right? If these Tennessee embalmers are so concerned about this, now that we're getting to year 6 of this, and they're still seeing this in a significant number of corpses, they're worried because, like I said, they never saw this before, this phenomenon. So, and they suspect what it's doing, that it's causing strokes and heart attacks in people.
Is it accurate to describe them as amyloid, or is that
absolutely? In fact, they've been tested under what's called thioflavin T staining, which you put a thioflavin T stain on them, then you look at them under a UV light. They light up green like a Christmas tree. And it also corroborates the work of Dr. Risa Pretorius. Risa is in South Africa, and she's been looking at the microclots and doing thioflavin T staining of microclots, and has gotten the same results. So it corroborates all the results that they are basically microclots that are then aggregated into these macroclots that, like I said, because it becomes so tough and rubbery that the only way you can get rid of them is to remove them physically with these catheters,
right? Or
for a vascular surgeon to go in and cut them out.
Right.
The trick is, we think, is for them not to form in the first place. And the way to do that is Dr. Peter McCullough has his protocol of nattokinase, bromelain, curcumin. And he said that it's shown good progress on helping to take the spike protein, detox the body of the spike protein. So then the spike protein can't drive the formation of the microclots, which eventually become these macroclots or white fibrous clots. So.
All right, something's going on with this, but.
One of the things that's interesting is I've tried, like I said, the last 4 years to run these embalmer surveys, and my best year I had was 2024. I had 301 respondents. Now, I sent it out to over 1,700 funeral homes around the world, Mary, as well as to 50 national, regional, and state funeral director associations, each with hundreds of members under them. So I should have gotten about 5,000 responses, if everybody had responded. My best year, I only got about 300 responses. And one of the interesting things is one of the questions we asked, like in our 2024 survey, is does your funeral director association talk about the clots? When you have your annual conventions or monthly or quarterly newsletters. And even though 83% of the embalmers said they were seeing the clots, less than 20% of their funeral director associations are talking about them. So there's a hush-hushness going on there. They don't want to talk about it. One of the organizations I've tried to get to take the survey for the last 4 years is the British Institute of Embalmers. They have refused every year to take the survey. They said there's not a problem, but it's bizarre too, because one of their own embalmers, it's a member. I'm in contact with him, and he has actually posted the results of my surveys on they used to have a forum where the embalmers could go and read articles about things going on in embalming. And the surveys that I did were looked at like 6,000 times, even though their membership is only like 1,600 members. Right. So people are looking at, but just recently the BIE took down that forum, and now there's no longer a way for those embalmers in their own membership to communicate with each other in this forum. Isn't that bizarre?
Wow.
Here's what I think is happening. I think a lot of these funeral directors and presidents of these funeral director associations and board members, they're funeral directors themselves, and they probably mandated their employees take the COVID-19 vaccine. So would you want to participate in a survey that might show a link between the vaccine and the white fibrous clots if you mandated all your employees take the shots? Probably not, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So
it's very frustrating. I mean, this is just one more piece of data that we have on top of all the other data. It's very frustrating. I'm sure you saw the cancer data just dropped from 2023. We've been waiting for that, and it's not been picked up by any major news outlets at all. It's it's going to be quietly dismissed like everything else, but we will eventually get the truth out. I know that.
The cath, I tried to run a cath lab worker blood clot survey based on the 2 whistleblowers that we had in 2024 and 2025. I sent a survey similar to the one we do for the embalmers out to 120 vascular surgeons across the U.S., as well as the vascular surgery societies in the U.S., Canada, UK, and Australia, New Zealand. Guess how many responses I got, Mary? Zero.
Wow.
None.
Wow.
None. Yeah. So the doctors don't want to talk about it at all. So what I did then, I said, well, if I can't get good information from the doctor in, maybe I can get it from the patient in. So with the help of Dr. John Campbell and Clayton Morris at Redacted, they displayed a QR code for me to a people's blood clot survey that I developed. And guess what? In 2 weeks, over 1,400 people from around the world, all around the world, were happy to take my blood clot survey to talk about their own personal blood clot experience. So the patients are happy to tell you about their blood clotting experience, even though the doctors are staying silent. Let me read to you that at the end of the, some of the data in that. First of all, one of the interesting things is I asked them, when did you have your blood clotting issue? And what was interesting is of the 1,400 people that responded, only 79 had their blood clotting issue in the year 2020, the year we had COVID but no vaccines yet. But then the numbers exploded to over 500 per year, 2021 all the way through 2024, over 500 each year after the vaccines rolled out. So I don't know what that's telling you, but it's showing me a signal which one's the main culprit on causing the clots. So, and another thing that was interesting is I wasn't sure whether these people were being totally truthful or honest, but then one of the questions I asked was, well, where is your clotting problem? And in the 1,400 people, the number one answer was legs, followed by lungs, followed by brain, followed by heart. And then there were some others. And what's interesting about that, Mary, is that it dovetails perfectly, that batting order does, with the CDC's very own VSafe data. Now, a lot of people are familiar with VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, but the CDC had a second system, VSafe, right? downloadable app that people could download to talk about their vaccine experience. And 10 million Americans downloaded that app.
All right.
Of those, by the way, 800,000, 8%, had a severe event that was bad enough they either had to go to the hospital, emergency room, urgent care, or schedule a doctor's appointment to resolve the issue. But there was also a free text data field in that vSafe database. And the CDC did not want to release it. But Del Bixby and the folks at ICANN said, oh, yeah, we're going to make you release that. So they went to a judge, for a FOIA request. And the judge said, yeah, CDC, we're going to make you turn that over. So they eventually did turn it over. They've been turning it over in the form of Excel spreadsheets. I've been going through them and searching on the term blood clot. And guess what? The CDC's own vSafe data. Legs is the number one location, followed by lungs, followed by brain, followed by heart. So it gave me very strong confidence that the 1,400 taking my survey were answering honestly and accurately because they were matching the vSafe data perfectly.
All right.
So, but here, let me read to you a couple of, at the end of both the embalmer surveys and the people survey, we allow the people comment section if they want to talk more about what they're seeing. Here's one from a surgical nurse inside the system, Mary. It says, surgical nurse seeing a huge increase in clots. We're doing more amputations than I've seen my whole career. I'm definitely seeing the clots you're describing. When I say it's probably due to the COVID shot, everyone ignores me and there's silence in the operating room. I also hear the surgeons saying, I've never seen this before. Also, during heart surgeries, the surgeons are having a difficult time suturing as the tissues are just falling apart. Once again, the surgeons are saying, I've never seen anything like this before. A lot of patients are dying. Let me read you one more here. Get a load of this one. I was feeling fine, had pain left side below shoulder blade, started sweating and feeling weak. Called the ambulance. ECG did not show heart attack. Rushed to emergency. ECG did not show heart attack. Third different emergency. Doctor did ECG and an ultrasound. They were all perplexed. A cardiologist was called. I went to a heart institute. Arriving there, I went into cardiac arrest. Was out 2 minutes, 3 sets of compressions and 4 defibrillator shocks used. They went in through an artery at the wrist. They removed fibrous clot. They did not want to tell me, but a nurse whispered to me, it's the vaccine. We have so many.
Wow.
Follow-up appointment with the cardiologist. I asked the question directly. The doctor looked down and said, I cannot talk about it at the risk of losing my job. What do you think of that, Mary?
It's not surprising. Very sad.
I'm not real thrilled with that doctor who said that. I mean, I understand he's trying to keep his job and everything, but if they don't speak out about this, remember, if embalmers, funeral directors, vascular surgeons, cardiologists, endovascular specialists, they're the only ones that see what's going on in our veins and arteries. So if they don't tell us, we, the general public, don't know. So he's keeping this deadly secret a secret. And then, as you know, people are continuing to take COVID-19 vaccines. They're still available on the market.
Yep. 7 million children have had one this year. Hard to, right.
I know. It's horrible. It's just horrible. So I will continue to, like I said, next month I'm going to the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association's annual convention. Last year was in Nashville. This year it's in Chattanooga. I'll do another survey at the end of this year, worldwide survey. So to see what the percentage of corpses containing these clots. Like I said, they really haven't been going away. They've been fluctuating between 20 and 30% over the last 5 years. And to me, that shows there's a persistence to the mRNA continuing to produce spike protein, not in everybody, but in some people.
Right. Right. Yeah. I'm still seeing people with really high spike protein antibodies, 5 years after the shots, still.
Are you prescribing them a McCullough protocol, or what are you doing to help them?
No, I don't know. After talking to Kevin claims that the nattokinase won't work. It won't break them down. So it just.
Well, there was a study though that the nattokinase was used in vitro, right, in a petri dish. Then it showed, I think it broke down 84% of the microclots in the petri dish. Now I don't know how well it does in the human. Now I am familiar with what Kevin's doing with the double filtration plasmapheresis, and then the stem cell treatment he has going along with that. And that is showing a lot of promise. I think he's used that in about 14 or 15 patients already. The problem with that is, though, if the mRNA continues to produce spike, that may only be a temporary solution for these people. Now, if I had the money, I'd probably do it too if I was suffering that bad, because it's life saving, right? It's it's making them better right away.
It may be like dialysis that people have to go in periodically to have their blood filtered. But what would be nice is to find some sort of antidote or something that could break down the amyloid chemically. I mean, that would be ideal. And then it seems that the people that created this great technology of mRNA could figure out a way to stop it, right? Ideally, but
the problem is, Mary, as you know, they're not even investigating. They don't even acknowledge the clots. Hirschman has volunteered to send clots to whatever university labs want to take a look at them, but they're all afraid to touch them. The CDC, the FDA.
But what if we just sent it to a pathologist as a specimen and said, we could do that. Has anybody tried that?
Well, when I asked Dr. Brashear, are the clots that you're removing being sent to pathology? He says, no, we're just throwing them away. So the evidence is being destroyed, Mary. It's not even being looked at.
You and I should talk off camera about something that we could do. I think it'd be valuable to send it as a specimen to a pathologist without any context. Just say, okay, this is a clot.
Well, that's what Greg Harrison's team actually did. Because they were having a hard time getting anybody to look at them.
Right.
They actually, I won't say they lied, but I think they gave them the impression that the clot may have come from a dog as opposed to a human, which made it easier to handle ethically.
Right.
So universities did analysis of the clot based upon not fully understanding that they were human in origin. However, right. There is a university now that does know and is willing to accept the clot. So they're actually doing another test. Should be taking place, I think, later on this week, called Raman spectroscopy, which basically, it'll be a further, more solid proof of amyloid material, of this misshaped, misfolded proteins. And, on top of the confirmation we already have from the thioflavin T staining and Congo red staining and other techniques that have been used on the clots. So the team that I'm working with, they've been very thorough about this. And so they know what's happening, and they've submitted that information. It's available to university labs, to the FDA, the CDC, NIH. I've sent the information to them, but you don't hear anything about whether their own scientists are, working. And I would love to see them do that, by the way. I would love to see them do their own survey. Right. I'm happy to step back. I'm a retired Air Force guy. I'd like to actually go into retirement and just worry about golfing and other fun things, spending time with the family, and not having to do this chore. But since the FDA and the CDC aren't doing it, and the funeral director associations, the societies for vascular surgery, they could be surveying their own members, finding out what's going on. Hey, are you seeing these clots? When you see these clots, doctors, did that patient take the COVID-19 vaccine or not? Maybe these clots are appearing in people who haven't taken the vaccine, right?
Right.
It's possible. And
maybe
you might find out
people from these clots, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, who knows if we need them to do the surveys to find out. They could also determine, I suspect if they do find them in people who have not taken the vaccine, you might find those persons had blood transfusions. We're very suspicious that our current blood supply may be tainted, right, with mRNA and spike protein in it, because 80% of American adults over the age of 18 took at least their first 2 jabs, and they've been donating blood for the last 5 or 6 years. Right. So we may have a problem with our blood supply.
Well, this has been very interesting. Thank you so much, Tom. Is there anything else you want to share, or how can people follow you?
Like I said, they can follow my work through my assistant, Miss Laura Kasner, our Substack, free Substack, no charge for it. It's called Clotastrophe. Laura, Laura, Kasner, Kasner.substack.com. You'll see lots of articles on the results of all 4 of our worldwide embalmer surveys, the cath lab survey we tried to run, my phone call with Jay Bhattacharya, my meeting with Tucker Carlson, just all kinds of information out there. Also, Greg Harrison's work about all the different tests that have been done on the clots to prove they are indeed misshaped, misfolded proteins, amyloid material. And you know, Mary, this amyloid is something that prior to this, you associated with neurological diseases, right? Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, amyloid build up in the brain over decades, you know. But now we're seeing this is the first time we've discovered a blood-borne amyloidosis, right? Where the amyloids are all throughout the vascular system and they're forming quickly. So what we suspect may happen in the future is we'll start to see more dementia cases, more Alzheimer's, more Parkinson's develop more quickly as this microclotting and these white fibrous clots clog up a lot of people's vascular system.
Yeah, it's scary. Well, thank you so much, Tom. Great to talk. And I'd love to have you back after the big meeting